Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Get Healthy Tampa Bay podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kerry Reller, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Shayla Toombs Withers. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited for our discussion today. And as always, I like to have us hear about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So, by trade, I am a physician. I'm board certified in both family medicine and obesity medicine, but I also do metabolic health coaching to folks virtually throughout the country. I've been practicing for a number of years and really just, I found that a lot of folks struggle with their metabolic health, and we're seeing more of that come about. And so, a lot of what I do now is a focus on lifestyle medicine. I also have a background in plant-based nutrition and I'm plant-based myself. So I tend to incorporate a lot of that into helping folks with their metabolic health. I'm based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I have a brick and mortar clinic practice as well.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we definitely have a lot of things in common, that's for sure. But what kind of brought you into focusing on plant-based nutrition kind of as the key component of treating metabolic health disease?
Yeah, for sure. And so, even just within myself, I transitioned my own diet to a more plant-based diet after I had my first kid years ago. And it was really just after going through residency training. I call him my residency baby because I had him my last year residency. All the stress and everything that comes with that. And so after that, I was like, I need to, get healthy for my baby. And so I transitioned my diet. And the more I started eating more healthfully, I naturally just wanted to do more for myself because I started feeling better. I felt, I was feeling less stress. Picked up running. I had never been a runner before and started running like 5Ks and then marathons. And so I just saw what amazing results I saw in my own health. And then the more I just read about plant-based nutrition and how this really affects our metabolism and how it can be useful in preventing and reversing common chronic diseases that we see. And so I just, started incorporating naturally more into that, into the way that I was just talking to patients, just even in clinic, and then seeing them even get those results, being able to, take people off insulin back when we were kind of having everybody on insulin, but getting people
Mhm.
lowered on their insulin doses and taking them off and seeing their cholesterol improve and just seeing these changes. And so that just really propelled me forward more into doing this. And now, after getting my fellowship in obesity medicine and really seeing more of the studies and things related to obesity and how just having the nutrients and that fiber and those things that we get from plants and the effects that it can have on weight management and metabolic health from that, that's just really gotten me more on track with knowing that this is something that people need to know and helpful.
Absolutely. So, speaking of that, they need to know. So, how about let's define what is plant-based? And I mean, you kind of alluded to it already, but how about why plant-based?
Right. Yeah. So I start with the umbrella because nowadays, we got a label for everything. But plant-based up under that umbrella can fall vegetarian, veganism, even pescatarian. And so really is the key is just putting more plants on your plate, having a plant predominant, I'm getting tongue tied, a plant predominant way of eating where that is really the focus. And so if we look at a lot of lifestyles from other countries and continents, especially in the world of plant-based nutrition, a lot of the research actually came from looking at Asian populations and populations where people just tend to live a whole lot longer than we do in America. And what they found in those populations is that not necessarily that they're all vegan, because that's just more of a label that we slap on things, but that they eat a plant predominant diet. So even if they do eat meat, meat is more of the garnish. It's just a little small side, just a garnish, and it's more a plant focus versus a lot of times here in America, we do the opposite of that, where, you go to a restaurant and you get your little two pieces of broccoli and then you have your, 15-ounce steak. And so, just that's the difference in what, I mean, when I say plant-based or plant forward versus a more meat predominant diet.
Yeah, I was about to say I've heard the term plant forward, and how would you kind of wrap that in there?
Right. Yeah. I think just over time, kind of the community, especially those of us who are in healthcare as well as plant-based, we've kind of change the terminology just because if I say the word vegan, for a lot of people, that's going to bring up a whole lot of other thoughts, and not all of them are going to be positive thoughts. And I've even had people who, come to my practice and they say, well, I don't know if I can be vegan. And I'm like, that's not a requirement to work with me that you be vegan. I am going to tell you how to helpfully get more plants, on your plate and into your nutrition, but you don't have to think of it that way, because the other part to being vegan is also beyond just nutrition. You have people who are vegan for ethical reasons, a
Mhm.
variety of things. And so those folks will also tend to only wear certain clothing, or, only buy certain goods if they haven't been tested on animals. And so, veganism itself just brings about a whole other set of things beyond just nutrition. So that's why a lot of us will use the term plant-based or plant forward when we're just kind of sticking more in the nutritional aspect of it. Now, the other key with plant-based, especially if you see whole food plant-based, I do like to break that separate part down for
Mhm.
people. And so whole food plant-based is going to be all plant products. So no animal products, no meat, no chicken, no fish, no eggs, no dairy, but also whole food plant-based eliminates oils, it eliminates added sugars, as well as a lot of times salt too, for people who are really, sticking to that whole food plant-based. And, we do know that there are tremendous health benefits to eating that way. But I also am, a realist to know that not everybody is going to be able to stick to that from a sustainability approach. And that's really one of the keys within metabolic health, is helping people to do something sustainable. A lot of times folks who've had metabolic conditions, they've been on every diet. So it's not about just putting them on another diet. It's about an approach that's going to be healthful yet sustainable. And so that's why I don't particularly just say, gotta just be all vegan or this or that kind of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I knew or heard of that definition for the whole food plant-based. My opinion of that, or what I thought, it was more of like not thinking that Beyond Beef was included. So like eliminating the processed foods that are
Mhm.
plant-based. So
Right. Yeah. And so, and the reason the processed foods are eliminated in whole food plant-based is because of the oils and the
oils, yeah.
additives. Right.
Okay, that makes sense. So you mentioned this metabolic health. How would you define that, and what does that all like mean, really?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's those conditions that are metabolism, if you will, is affects. So that are things, diabetes, pre-diabetes, those insulin resistance type conditions that we see. So metabolic syndrome, which is having elevated blood sugar, having elevated cholesterol, having challenges with weight loss. And so chronic obesity falls up under that umbrella as well. And then even PCOS, hormonal changes fall under that umbrella, with insulin resistance and metabolic change and issue. And so really it's this constitution of conditions where our hormonal system, if you will, is out of balance. You and I know that insulin is a hormone that we naturally make, unless you have an autoimmune condition, and that's a whole nother umbrella there. But insulin is usually, that hormone that we make. And then in these conditions, though, it's become resistant. So it's not working as well to keep our blood sugars at that steady state. And so because of that, then we start developing these other symptoms and syndromes that have to do with these other conditions that I mentioned there. So.
Hmm. Yeah, so the hormones, we're not just talking like male, female hormones. We're actually talking about there's all these other sorts of hormones in the body
Yeah,
that work and control appetite and glucose
right.
and regulate like all of the regulatory systems. And I mean, even thyroid, I guess, would be
Yeah.
pertinent there too. But so how do you uniquely approach the conditions of insulin resistance with your therapeutic management?
So I teach people from a method that I call the mind-body balance approach. And so in looking at that, we look at your nutritional aspect. We look at your movement, and I term it intentional movement and not just exercise. And I can break that down in a moment. And then the other aspect to that we look at is your mental health, that mental health aspect, and not just so much of, if you have a diagnosis of depression or anxiety or what have you, but even what your mindset is, how are you setting goals and how are you going to achieve those things? And then as well as stress and sleep falling under that mindset and mental umbrella, because we do know that those components also play a part. When they're out of whack, they can also throw those hormonal levels that we talked about out of whack as well, and can contribute to those hunger hormones being off balance, that insulin being off balance, and those things that contribute to metabolic disease.
So this whole mind body balance approach, I think, is, obviously a great approach. And I think some of that is going to incorporate some of the obesity medicine principles that you were trained in, right? And you did an
Right.
actual fellowship versus
Correct.
just continuing education, which is really interesting as well. So how do you like bring in the plant-based approach to all of those things, or
Yeah.
just tell me about what you do?
Yeah. So when the way I look at it with mind body balance and with our even our nutrition is, I like to give the example of like if one of these things are out of balance. So let's say you had a stressful day at work. So that piece that your mindset is probably going to be a bit shook and off balance there.
Mhm.
And so then what tends to happen is for a lot of us, then emotional eating may come into play. So we may not make the best nutritional decision at that moment. So then we go eat that cheeseburger, bacon double, whatever. And then now we're feeling sluggish. So we're not going to go get any movement because now we've eaten this really heavy, high saturated fat meal. And so now it's affecting our movement because we're not going to feel like going to do that. And so all of these things are a balance within each other. Now, when we're optimizing even just one of these components, it can tend to impact the other. So if you are already, focusing using that same example, if you were already focusing on changing your mindset about things. So yeah, you may have had a stressful day at work, but we've been working on some of your mindset strategies and we've been working on some stress management strategies together. You may go and do a breath work exercise. And so now you feel that stress has come down. And so now, when you go eat, you're focusing on nurturing your body in a way that's going to further promote health for you. And so you're going to make a more conscious decision and a better decision for what you're eating. So now you may go choose that plate of brown rice with some lean plant-based protein on top of it instead. And then you're going to feel even more energized. And then you might go for that 15-20 minute walk because now you're feeling more energized and you've got that clarity in your mind to know that, yeah, when I go for this walk, it's going to even take my stress down further and I'm going to feel better overall. And so that's, just an example of how I work with folks to incorporate these pieces.
Yeah, so you mentioned breath work, right? So the one way to bring stress down. Are there other things that you use to try to help with the stress management so that, like you said, they can be ready to make better decisions and
Yeah.
be more mindful of what they're eating and everything?
Yeah, yeah. So a couple of things. So breathwork is definitely one I like. Another one I like, especially because a lot of the folks I tend to see are business professionals, like you and I. They're working hard, full time, a lot of moms with kids, and they're trying to do all the things. So another thing I like is just positive affirmations and even just guided meditations. And for these, they don't have to be long. And I tell people, a lot of times people think you tell them to go do a meditation and they got to go, sit on a special carpet in a quiet room for 30 minutes. But, that's not what it has to be. You can do a 5 minute guided meditation just sitting in your car because you decided to take a break from your office for a few minutes just to kind of bring your stress down. And you can just do that quick guided meditation that way. And that's, another way of bringing that stress down for you to then help regulate your body and regulate your system. Some other things, especially surrounding sleep, a lot of times we don't prioritize sleep, but in terms of getting good sleep, that's also another way of managing your stress. And even if you're feeling more stressed at bedtime, it can go back to those meditations, sleep meditations, and I think those have become more popular, which is good to see. But sleep meditation, sleep sounds, aromatherapy is another thing that I found to be helpful for individuals. So things just like a lavender oil, even just, you can spray it on your pillow if you're going to sleep, or even just a little dab on your arm if it's, more towards the middle of your day and you need something more calming. Even things like acupuncture, massage therapy, those are all other good self-care, stress regulation tips and helpful things as well.
Yeah, so overall, these things are, helping with stress management and perhaps bringing those, cortisol levels down, right?
Right.
So they kind of maybe help reset in a way, right? I don't like to usually talk about willpower, but you only have so much of that in the day. So you're more
Yeah.
likely, if you find these times to do these specialized things to help with stress management, you're more likely to reset and be able to make those good decisions, right? So I think
Right.
those are really good tactics that you're using.
Yeah,
And
and I
then,
like that word reset.
yeah,
I've never, used that for that. But yeah, but
yeah,
you're exactly right. It is just like a, a mind and a body reset, if you will. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, that's like you could do that midday. And then you mentioned that sleep, which is also very important to get that in a routine for that to help have better sleep with a lot of people having anxiety from work or those elevated stress levels. I often sometimes refer patients to those apps if they want to, like Headspace and Calm or
Mhm.
some. And then there's also free stuff everywhere for helping those guided meditations. Because when I bring it up to patients too, they're always like, that's woo, that's woo. We don't really
Right.
want
Yeah.
to do it, but it really does kind of help and you can
It
see
does.
improvement.
Yeah, you really can. And then, I tell people it's like, what's the worst that can happen? You sat and listened
Right.
to somebody talk to you for 5 minutes. It's not going to harm you.
Right.
So,
And then I mean
yeah.
you're supposed to wander off and bring
Yeah.
yourself back to it, right? So that's
Mhm.
that's definitely part of it as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, I think if you're making better decisions, but overall, if you're working on your stress, you're going to improve that insulin sensitivity in and of itself, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah. Because, what we know about chronic stress, like you mentioned, cortisol, it does, it
Mhm.
raises your cortisol level. And we know cortisol then can lead to higher blood glucose levels, which can challenge your insulin more and make it promotes that insulin resistance, making it harder for you to achieve healthy weight loss, to achieve more balanced blood sugar if you're someone with diabetes or pre-diabetes. So it's really important. It can also affect those hunger hormones and make those become unbalanced, which is why, a lot of times we do tend to have cravings more for more food and for more unhealthy foods when we're feeling more stressed or when we lack sleep. A lot of times people at night say, "Oh, I just need some ice cream before I go to bed." Well, you're probably just really sleepy and just need to go to bed. But, your hormones are telling you, go have that ice cream kind of deal because of that.
Yeah, and some of that I'm sure you address is like out of habit of doing that too. And you mentioned setting goals and changing things like that. Well, I guess we could get to that later. But so you also mentioned intentional movement. So
Yeah.
how does that fit into improving metabolic health?
I like the term intentional movement. I started using this a while back instead of exercise because for a lot of us, we see exercise as a chore. It's like, oh, I gotta go exercise. Who wants to do that? And I know that because, before I started running, I was one of those people like, exercise. And so you're not going to prioritize it because it's just, thinking another chore. Versus if you think intentional movement, you're moving with the intention of achieving something. And that helps you to not only choose what type of movement you're going to do, but also make you feel motivated to go do that movement. So, that, for example, I'm going to go walk for 30 minutes, but I'm going to really be aiming to get my heart rate up and really be aiming, to accomplish so many steps or so many miles within that 30 minutes. Because I know if I do that, I'm going to be able to lower my blood sugar by this much, or I'm going to be able to lower my overall caloric intake for the day by that much. And so you're really thinking of intention. Or I'm going to go lift weights for 10 minutes today because I know that I need more muscle strengthening, because I know if I have more muscle strengthening, then it's naturally more metabolically active and I'm going to naturally burn more fat and calories with my body just by me going to do the strength routine. And so it's really, rethinking the way that you do that. And so that intentional movement piece then will, help you for those other metabolic conditions. Because
Mhm.
when we do move, we do know that exercise naturally lowers blood sugar and in turn makes that insulin doesn't have to work as hard to lower your blood sugar because it's already going to be lowering on its own. And so that helps those insulin resistance conditions as well. Movement helps that stress piece that we just, got through talking about. And so then that way it just sets you on this more healthful cycle as well when we move. And bonus points if you move outdoors, because then you're going to also get those endorphins, those happy hormones too, that are going to set off to make you feel even better, make you make more healthful choices, and overall improve your metabolism, your health and wellness that way.
I really like what you were saying about the muscle. So one thing I like to tell patients is, with the more muscle on the body, it's like the only thing that can use the glucose up that you're eating without having insulin on board. So it's another way to get the insulin down and get rid of the glucose as well, right? So having
Right.
those more muscles and using them more is like a glucose sponge, if you will, like
Yeah.
without needing the
Mhm.
insulin, which is really good.
Yeah, and and with the newer medicines too, I like to point that out because a lot of people I think tend to miss that part, even with a lot of the weight loss medicines that are on the market, is that they can, they help with weight loss, but they can also cause muscle loss. And so,
Mhm.
that's also why that's so important as well as you're just improving your overall metabolic health. Even though you're losing weight, you still want to be mindful of building that muscle strength as well.
Right. If they're losing, too much muscle, they're not really improving metabolic health, even with the
Right.
weight loss,
Yep.
right?
Yep. It's just the numbers going down.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's definitely something to really focus on as well. Now, do you also prescribe medications or
I
uh,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I do as well. We know that medications can be helpful to people because what we know about obesity now, which is also exciting, is that we know that it's not a condition of willpower. It's not a condition of just calories out, calories in. It's so much more complex than that. And so that's really where these medications have really been helpful for targeting those other genes that have been identified and those other hormones and mechanisms that play within our bodies that have been affecting our ability to lose weight and sustain weight loss. And so those medications have been really helpful in showing promise there. But it's still, a balance is that you do the medications, but we still important to do those lifestyle factors that we've been talking about as well.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I agree, like obesity has got the hormones in every, disarray, and it's important to improve upon those. And the medications do help with the increase of ghrelin and everything. So I think there's definitely an important role there. I was gonna ask because I was looking all over your website, but you also seem to use continuous glucometers, right? And I
I
wanted to
do.
get your input on, how and why you do that. Like,
Yeah, yeah. And so the thing I like about the continuous glucose monitors is that it helps us to see what our bodies are doing at different subsets of time. So I tell people, don't use them because, I do have some people who get really anxious and they say, oh, I just ate that apple and now my sugar, is showing 150 or whatever. But don't look at it like that. We look at it more of the trend and what is it doing over a trended amount of time. And that's helpful for a couple of reasons. It's helpful to know that, for instance, if every day during the week, especially weeks where you're working, your sugars are higher, then on the weekends, they're lower, then we know there's a stress component that's probably playing a part in your blood sugar. Or we know that when you're eating certain times a day, for example, then it makes your blood sugar higher at this other time of day. So we know we may need to look at maybe intermittent fasting for you, or we may need to look at the types of things that you're eating for those particular times a day. So I really use it to help more personalize and target for folks, really, the impact that their not only their food but also their lifestyle. I've seen some where if you didn't get enough sleep that night before, well, now we're seeing your sugars being much higher. And then I think that helps the patient as well to see that because it's more tangible to see what that's doing. So not so much of just seeing it as that one snapshot, which is what we see when you and I just order a set of labs. We're just seeing that one snapshot of a glucose, but more over that trended amount of time what those sugars are doing.
yeah, I think they're really fun to use and very enlightening to patients and it gives a little bit of accountability even, but they can take it a little too far,
Yeah.
right? Like you said, they get a little anxious about it. And I think it's important, like you're saying, you can point out other trends, not just what the food is doing, but what your, environment is also doing, like your stress at work, the sleep, all of those things can also really play a role and are important. And the one thing I think is a drawback is sometimes they say you're low and patients get all concerned and then they
Yeah.
may medicate with food when they weren't
Juice or
actually
candy, or,
hungry. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think they're so helpful in understanding, the hormones of your body and how things can really affect you. And
Yeah.
everybody's different. So it's kind of nice to see, what may affect someone more than another person.
And I'm glad you mentioned that too about like those lows when they happen because they can be really annoying and really loud. But it's also key for folks to know to work with somebody like you or I, so that we can help you set those parameters. So then when, you get that when you're not so freaked out, now they are selling these over the counter. There's a brand of meters that come out over the counter now. So before folks just go out and grab one and then, you're freaking yourself out, just, work with your doctor or your health coach or whatever to really set these parameters.
Yeah. So can you share some success stories from your patients who have adopted like a plant-based lifestyle?
Yeah, I have one lady, and this lady, she's a postmenopausal lady, and she's a grandmother. And so when I started working with her, she really, had some of those conditions that we typically see. So high blood pressure, high cholesterol, pre-diabetes. And she, her doctor had told her, well, we got to get some weight off. And then she wanted to get some weight off too, because she had this big trip that was coming up. We started working like in winter, and she had this trip coming up in the summer with her grandkids, and she was taking them to the beach. You got the water in your background. And so she was excited to be able to, want to be able to really like run around and really be active with the grandkids at the beach. And so plant-based was like foreign to this lady, because she just had never done it, had never really even, heard of doing that, but she just really wanted this change in these goals. And so one of the first thing we did was really, one of the first things I always do with folks that I coach is we set goals, and we set them in a way to make them achievable and to not feel intimidated by them. So we don't just set oh, I want to lose 50 pounds, just kind of thrown out in the air kind of goal. We sit down and really work through them. And so we look at why you want to, make these changes. And so that's when, we started talking about the grandkids and the things she wanted to do with the grandkids. And then also, as well as the health goals and the health conditions, the medications she wanted to take less of and those things. And then we set the smaller goals, so that makes, once you achieve those smaller goals, then you are continuing to work on those larger goals for yourself. And so we did that. And then we delved deep into her diet. And this lady, I love her. She's so funny. And so she would drink these coffee drinks, and I had never heard of them before I even met her, but she called them frosty coffee. Apparently you get a coffee and they put ice cream in it. And
That's a first.
She would have it every day though. Every day she went to work, she'd go, for fast food at lunch, and she'd get this frosty coffee with whatever other fast food meal that she was going to get. And so, we talked about really like what that frosty coffee, how was it making her feel? Like, why was she feeling the need to have that frosty coffee? And, sugar makes you feel more happy at that moment, it makes you feel more happy and makes you feel good. But then when that comes down, then, you're left with, oh, I just had a bunch of sugar and fat and calories kind of deal. So we redid some of that. We didn't take away all of the frosty coffees, but we took away the majority for the week. So, instead of 5 a week, we took that down to 1 a week. And so that way, she could, just have a goal, say, oh, I've done really well. So now I'm going to go have my frosty coffee for the week. And then we took down some of the other things she was consuming. Because she lived alone, she didn't tend to cook. So she would get a lot of the frozen meals. Well, we know those things tend to have a lot of additives just by sheer fact that they have to preserve them on a shelf for a long amount of time. And so we talked about ways that she could cook and not feel wasteful, but could still have helpful things that are just really easy and quick to put on the table. So some of the staples that I like to even mention for people and incorporate, because they're things that I do at home as well. But you can get the pre-made, pre-washed, lettuce greens, spinach greens. I typically recommend getting a tub of the spinach, get a tub of the salad. And then, that's one thing you got. And you can start from there as your base. You can batch cook easily, set of brown rice. You can batch cook some quinoa. You can batch cook a set of beans. So, a lot of things you can have beforehand, and you can mix and match those things and put them, you can make a bowl easily. Then if you want to spice it up, add different spices depending on what your taste is, or add a sauce depending on, what flavor if you're going for Italian, make a tomato sauce. If you're going for Asian, put a little soy or peanut sauce or what have you over it, to jazz it up. And then whatever other protein items you're doing. So if you are truly plant-based and you're doing tofu, then, put you some tofu in the oven and have that to your bowl and dinner's done. So we went through some of these things and had her do some of these things so that she felt more empowered to be able to do this on her own and not feel like, she has to cook for a large family, but just cooking for herself and not having to reach for those type of meals. And so she did, and she did these things. We met regularly. By the time she got ready to go to the beach with those grandkids, she said, Dr. Shayla, my skinny jeans that I used to have ready for when I got skinny, she said, well, now they're too big. So we got a problem.
Yeah.
I said,
That's
well,
awesome.
that's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Your skinny
And
jeans are too
clearly her
big.
goal was not to
Right.
fit in her bathing suit, right?
Right,
Clearly.
exactly. No, no. And it was, just to really feel good with playing with those grandkids. And she did, and she achieved that just, with these tangible approaches. Yeah.
I love the coffee story. And not that my patients are having frosty coffee because I've never heard of it, but I mean, that's usually one thing where I'm like, hey, what are you doing every single day? Like you got a new diagnosis of prediabetes or diabetes, something that you're doing every day on a daily habit is doing something. So what is it? And sometimes it's dialing down into like what's in the coffee, like tons
Mhm.
of sugar. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I have 3 teaspoons in my coffee a day. Okay. Well, how many cups of coffee are you having a day? Right. So then
Right.
it's like adding and adding up of all these, things that more sugar, which is obviously not helpful for the insulin resistance. So I
Yeah.
love attacking the coffee, but I'm also thankful that you allowed her to still have one a week.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and I'm sure
Right. Yeah.
she is too.
It's about balance.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I guess what would be your top 3 pieces of advice to start improving your health today for someone who's struggling with insulin resistance or metabolic issues?
Yeah, so if you're getting started out, and I always like to say Rome wasn't built in a day. So we don't expect, these full changes to occur really quickly. But if you were starting out, so what I would recommend, one, put more plants on your plate. And it doesn't mean you have to go completely vegan, but even just starting by, even if you just separate your plate, most of us now know the plate method. So even if you just started by making half of your plate just some dark leafy greens, for example, you're going a lot further than you probably have before. And you're going to feel a lot fuller if you even consume that first. And you may not even eat the other stuff that's there, not eat as much of it. So the key, first thing I would say is to definitely put more plants on your plate. The second thing I would say is to lift something heavy. And, that's because what we talked about with that muscle and the importance of having muscle mass so that you just naturally make your body more metabolically active and just make your body, work for you throughout your day. So lift something heavy for sure. And then that third thing would be to get some support, so people don't feel like they have to go it alone. There's a lot out there on the internet, but it's not all good stuff. And if you don't really know the difference in what's really helpful versus what's harmful, you might be choosing something that's more harmful. So really get support from someone, who is experienced and who can healthfully help you to make these changes so that it's sustainable and so that you're not feeling like you're on this roller coaster all the time.
So I meant to ask this earlier, but what do you do for the patient who comes in saying, I hate all vegetables?
Yeah, yeah. And I actually love those patients. And I'll tell you why. Because
Challenge.
usually it's something that we can find that they do like, and we start there. So, for those people, and I've had a patient like this one that I recall, and it was a male, it was a man patient. And so he was definitely a steak and potatoes, kind of guy. And so we got down to it. I said, well, I just start naming out stuff. Well, you like this? Do you like that? Do you like that? And so we got down to string beans was one thing that he did like, and he would eat string beans and corn. And so we know corn is not exactly a vegetable, it's a grain, but we could work with it. And so, we started there with just having more string beans and then slowly trying some other things, and it worked. It did take him a bit longer to get there to improve. This particular patient of mine, he was actually on insulin. So, but we were able to start being able to move his insulin down once we start getting more plants incorporated. But we just started with string beans because there's typically something that somebody likes, but you just really gotta get to it. But he was definitely not my guy that I could go tell, go make a salad bowl and do that because he was not
Mhm.
gonna. So,
I also often like to discuss how they're cooking it or how they ate them previously, right? Because
that definitely
I
makes sense.
remember my mom putting lemon on broccoli and thinking it was terrible. But now I do roasted broccoli. I mean, I use olive oil pretty good and then salt and pepper, and like my kids love it, right? I
Yeah.
love it. Like
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it. And
Uh-huh.
so sometimes the
Yeah.
way that you prepare the vegetables is a big deal, like canned and
Right.
frozen, while they're
Yeah, I'm
great.
glad you mentioned that as well too.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was cauliflower. When I was a kid, I was like, oh, this is disgusting. But they did to it was like boil it, and give you like that overboiled cauliflower.
Yeah.
And I still will not eat it that way. But you're right. But if I roast it, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that
Boiling, I
that's
think, also
good.
takes away the nutrients, but I think
It
that
does.
was a lot of maybe that what they used to do previously. But I mean, I think the whole way she did Brussels sprouts, I always hated too. And then I had them roasted, and guess what? They're delicious, right?
Yeah,
So I think teaching a little bit of how to prepare foods and having them
right.
try them again and again in different ways, I think is one way to have, vegetables or something that they don't like that's healthy reintroduced.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
like you said, you can get some plant on the plate for every
Yeah,
meal. I think
yeah, for
it's
sure.
important. So, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners on this topic of metabolic health and plant-based nutrition?
Yeah, yeah. So if folks are looking to get started, I do offer a free program. It's called the Nourish and Flourish. It's a 5-day program. It's called a 5-day challenge, but really the challenge is you versus you. Um, but it's 5 days, and each of those 5 days, folks will receive a little reminder in their email box, and they can go watch a video. They get a healthful recipe that are plant-based recipes. So if you're looking for some healthful plant-based, they're easy to prepare. So you don't have to be a chef to do it. But yeah, I will have them, just start there, take a look at the Nourish and Flourish 5-day challenge, just to really get you started with, and it goes into those different mindset, mind body balance approach with the healthful plant-based recipes incorporated.
Awesome. So, is there somewhere they can find you or reach out to you if they want to
Yeah,
work with
so they
you?
can find that at drshayla.com/NF challenge, or my main website, which is drshayla.com/EOH. And that way they can find that Nourish and Flourish challenge and all the different ways to reach me. I'm on social media under Essence of Health, and I'm at TikTok under Dr. Shayla.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. And we'll include all that in our show notes. And obviously, if anybody needs a primary care doctor in Clearwater or Palm Harbor, please reach out to us at 727-446-1097. And please stay tuned for next week. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.